Greetings everyone and welcome back to 365 Days of Prog. Today we're going to be reviewing the story of I by Patrick Moraz.
Hi, my name's Naomi. I'm an avid progressive rock fan, but I'm a long ways from knowing all the prog albums out there. But this year, I'm gonna give it a try. This is 365 Days of Prog.
Patrick Moraz, you know him, he has the cool hair, he's from Switzerland and this is his debut album, and here's some of my favorite bits from this album. So most of you, if not all of you, might not know this, but back in episode 242 I reviewed Starless and Bible Black by King Crimson. Now that within itself isn't anything that special, but if there's one thing special about that episode is the way that I personally perceived it and the way that you guys responded to my creation of it. Now on its surface it doesn't look like a very special episode, but one thing that I did do on that one is to do some thorough research about the album that I was reviewing and giving you a very good overview of it. And well, back then and seeing your response, I suddenly had a realization that from now on I want my videos to be well researched and actually give a very good historical background on each and every album and band and artist that I'm reviewing. So I decided to go on forth and actually do some proper research because I learn a lot from it and you guys enjoy it, so I might as well. And well, lately we've had a lot of very valuable albums on that regard, a lot of albums with some very interesting backstories to them, and I think that it basically all comes to the highest today with the album we're reviewing today, which is of course Patrick Moraz, The Story of I. Now let's talk a bit about the person himself. If you're like me, up until today the only place I actually knew his playing from was of course from the seminal Yes album from 1974 called Relayer, where he of course plays with the band on his keyboards. And honestly, I love that album, my favorite Yes album by far, but the thing is, that's all the acquaintance I had with Patrick Moraz, and honestly, I didn't really think a lot about him until I actually got down to reading about his life and career, and oh boy, is there a lot to say about this person. So Patrick Philip Moraz was born on the 24th of June 1948 in the Sky. Yes, I'm not joking, Patrick Moraz was born on an airplane. But to make things simpler, his hometown in his childhood was actually a place called Morges in Switzerland. And Patrick Moraz came from a family of musicians, and he himself started learning the piano, the violin, and also just percussions at a very young age. And by the age of 5 he was already composing his own pieces. And when he grew up a bit, jazz became his ambition. Of course he was still studying classical music, but he was performing a lot of jazz, and well, it all came to a sudden halt when at the age of 13 he would be involved in a roller skating accident that would cause the breaking of 4 of his right hand's fingers. And well, that did disable a lot by being unable to play with his dominant hand, so of course he did the only logical thing and practiced a lot playing with his left hand, and then as time went by his right hand healed, and thus now he was ambidextrous, being able to play equally with both hands. And Moraz grew up to be a very promising musician. When only at the age of 16 he would win the Best Soloist Award at the Zurich Jazz Festival, becoming the youngest person to ever do so. And Moraz would go on to do many things even unrelated to music in the following years. He would learn Latin and Greek, he would go on to play in front of Salvador Dali, he would become a scuba diver instructor, he would perform jazz in Africa, and he would even go on to sell encyclopedias. And in 1969, Moraz would move to England in order to form his own progressive rock band, seeing as progressive rock was just starting to take its footing in the world of music. And well, he wanted to make something special, and the band, which he would go on to name Main Horse, had to have a really good percussionist, and he specifically wanted the percussionist to be somewhere between John Bonham of Led Zeppelin to, of course, no other than the legendary Buddy Rich. And after testing more than 250 drummers, Moraz would settle on the drummer called Bryson Graham. Now, he would form the rest of the band with other members he tested himself, and unfortunately the band really didn't seem to go in a lot of places. They did release one album, but in 1973 their runtime was over, and when Moraz decided he would leave back and go to Switzerland again. And in the year of 1974, Moraz would be approached by a band called The Nice to come and replace their former keyboardist, which was supposed to be Keith Emerson, and Moraz actually accepted the invitation and moved back to England, only to not form The Nice with him, but instead reform a new group entirely from the same members called Refugee. And Refugee released one album the same year, and it did seem to be very much promising, and they were supposed to be going on an uphill journey when suddenly in 1974, though later, Moraz would receive yet another invitation to join another band, this time coming from the legendary progressive rock group known as Yes. Yes's keyboardist Rick Wakeman just left the band, and they were looking for a new keyboardist to replace him. They actually did try out Vangelis, the Greek composer, and although he was good, they didn't really have a good chemistry between them, mostly due to language barriers, so someone suggested they would try out Moraz for the role. So doubtful and conflicted, Moraz actually went ahead and attended the audition, and in the audition itself he actually played on Vangelis's keyboards because they were still not taken out of the studio at the time, and the task he received was to take the piece that would become later on into Sound Chaser from the album Relayer and try and create for it an opening keyboard part, and Moraz just played what he wanted to play, and that part was so good that not only did it get him his place on Yes, but it was actually chosen to be the part which was played on the album itself. And together with Yes, they would create together an album called Relayer, which is personally my favorite Yes album of all time. And after a quick hiatus in 1976, the band would go on to start work on their next album called Going for the One. But then out of nowhere, Rick Wakeman decided he would rejoin the band, and well, Yes was in a stalemate and they had to let Patrick Moraz go, so they kindly asked him to leave. And well, Patrick Moraz knew that there was no bad blood between them, but he did say that he was very much displeased with the way that things went down, and honestly it did disturb his own stability, especially in a foreign land. Nevertheless, Patrick Moraz did find his footing afterwards and did continue on to create a very good prog legacy, and of course be in touch with the entirety of the prog community. And this is where we meet today's album of topic, 1976, The Story of I, created technically when Moraz was still a part of Yes. And Moraz at the time became infatuated with percussion instruments, so much actually that he went to Bolivia, Colombia, and Argentina to learn the real essence of a lot of percussive sounds. And well, when he wanted to create his own debut solo albums, he brought forth 16 percussionists to actually play on it, and despite there being 16 different people playing percussion on here, he somehow still takes the show with his keyboards. Now, this album is actually a concept album, and the concept is a very peculiar story, so I'll try and recap it as best as I can. So there's this hotel, and above the hotel there's this big giant sphere that controls the hotel itself, and it is said that the sphere can grant anyone's wishes. So people are climbing the floors of the hotel one by one in the very arduous journey to reach to the top and have their wishes fulfilled. But the thing is that everyone that reaches the top has to take a dive towards the bottom, and instead of floating up to the sphere, they instead just fall a very long fall and then then collide with the ground and being reduced to atoms, with their wish of course not being fulfilled. And the story itself tells of a couple that meet on their way up and they subsequently actually fall in love, and when they reach the top, instead of diving and falling to the ground, they are being lifted up into the sphere itself. Yeah, I know, it's a weird concept, but the thing about this album is that it plays amazingly and amazingly like concept album as well. On the two sides, each and every track flows very much seamlessly next to the other one, and they don't feel like one giant piece as a whole, but instead they do have some individual qualities for each and every one of them. And of course everything is being spearheaded by Moraz's perfect playing on the most exotic and very much odd sounding keyboards he could ever find. I will also say that he makes excellent use on synthesizers over here. This album does a lot with the synths, and honestly to a great extent it doesn't sound bad at all. But if I had to mention some things that I do believe are not that good about this album, I would point out the vocals done by John McBurney. I don't know who he is, but I know that his vocals usually sound like some sort of a cheap knockoff of either the Bee Gees or Jeff Lynne from ELO, which is something that I don't like that much. And of course, if you're not really into the whole tribal rhythm percussion vibes that exist in South America, they are abundant on this album, so you might not like that as well. But as it seems to me, people who dislike this album absolutely hate this album as well. You of course have two opposite directions. You have the ones which really love this one and they think that it's a great album, and you have the people that can't stand it. And honestly, I get it, because one song on here kind of feels like a lot of the other. It's full of synths and keyboards and a lot of good Brazilian percussion. If you like that, you're gonna love the album. If you don't, you're gonna hate it. But personally, I love this album for whatever reason that it has to be, and I think that the shining moment on this entire album has to be the track Intermezzo. Now this one is just a beautiful track. It has everything. It has a piano solo, it has keyboard solos, great percussions, and even vocals not done by John McBurney, but instead by two female singers. Now the thing is, and that's something that I've never heard anywhere, the two female singers are singing side by side, but the thing is, one is singing in English while the other is singing in French, and instead of just sounding very much discombobulated, it sounds just marvelous with such a beautiful harmony. And the thing is, the English female vocalist is actually Vivian McAuliffe, which we've met just a few days ago because she sang on the Anthony Phillips album The Geese and the Ghost. And the rest of the story of I is just basically indescribable. There's really no way that I can describe it more with words, and of course to get the full experience of it, you just gotta go and have a listen at this one for yourself. And honestly, even if you're not gonna like it, you're gonna listen to one of the most thrilling keyboard prog albums that I've ever heard, of course from one of the most thrilling and prolific keyboard players in all of progressive rock. I really do like this cover, and I love the way that it uses colors much like Rams's Space Hymns, which I do believe also has an excellent use of very vibrant and neon green colors. And of course this one, at least to me, seems like the figure, the big I figure, which of course resembles the story of I, which is the hotel. So I think that the I figure is like the silhouette of the hotel itself, and then you have the big sphere on top with the heart in the middle, symbolizing that to get there you have the power of love or some shit like that. And it's a cool cover that really does reflect the alienism that this one has when compared to the rest of the musical world, eventually even in the progressive rock world. And honestly, if I saw this one, it would definitely stick out of any shelf in a record shop. So this one, despite having the total energies of a 9, will get a very unwavering rating of 8 out of 10. But that's about it, guys. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and stay tuned for tomorrow because we're gonna be listening to Q Roan by John Greaves and others. I'm not gonna mention their names right now. I don't care that much. Of course, I want to thank my lovely supporters over on Patreon, so thank you so much to Clay Wan, Armist of Kings, and Lindsay Haycox. You guys are just the best, and if any of you want to support me over on Patreon, you can find the link down in the description or in my About page. But that's about it, guys. Have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Bye, guys.